Okay. Hello. Today's episode is a little different. It's a video interview through Zoom because we have to record it. And I'm here with Evee Walker. First of all, welcome to Bad Boss Show. This is a show where I invite different people with specialties in leadership development. And today we're going to talk to actually an investment banker. And we talk about what makes someone a good leader, a bad leader, what makes someone a powerful management team, leadership team. We're going to talk about culture. And I'm so excited to have Evee Walker, who is a friend and is a managing director of Shoreline Partners, specializing in providing marketing advisory services for capital raise and sales side clients and new business development. I love that you've been 7 years of M&A experience, backed with over 13 years in management, operations, scaling, transitioning businesses in the fintech, construction, consumer, retail industries. Welcome to my show, friend.
Hey, Anya, thanks. I'm really excited to be here. Really excited to talk on this topic as well.
Me too. And for those of you watching, I feel that as I go through life, I have the best conversations with such interesting people. And in my mind, I'm always like, like I wish we recorded this. I wish we like talked about it and could share it. So today is that. We're just gonna have a conversation about M&A, about transitioning, about acquisitions and mergers from a culture perspective. And my take on it as a speaker for Vistage, I've been having a lot of conversations with CEOs who are thinking of transitioning. We're either talking about acquisitions or exiting and selling and evaluation. So Evee, I'm going to have so many questions to you about and for you. Let's start with what matters most to PE firms, right? During the evaluation stage, when it comes to like culture and leadership team, can you, like, when you start, can you kind of feel the vibe pretty quickly?
Yeah, so it's interesting when acquirers are looking for good management teams, they're a little bit at a disadvantage, right? Because they're kind of dependent on what the seller tells them about their leadership team, right? And a lot of times it's not like the acquirer right off the bat is going to come into the company and talk to their CMO or their CFO or any employee at that. Really, it's between the founder or the selling party and maybe the people who are on the deal team who are going to be aware of it. So really, the buyer is usually at a disadvantage. But there are some things that the acquirers will look at that will help them determine like what exactly makes that team a good leadership team, to be specific. And usually right off the bat, they can tell that based on the track record of success, right? So if an acquirer is looking at the business financials, they can see it for over 4 years, the company's been profitable, they have great profit margins, they can usually ask questions with like, how long has your team been in place? Who are those key people? Have they been here for 5+ years? Are they
They're
new?
looking for longevity.
Yeah, longevity. But longevity doesn't necessarily mean they have the best experience, right? So, but when they do, that track record of success, right? Are they profitable? Are they driving? Are they striving for growth opportunities? Are they executing on those plans, right? That track record of success kind of paints the picture for the buyer to determine, okay, there's something here with this team. Now we have to dive in a little bit deeper, right? So I would say that that's the first one. Secondly is going to be, they're going to be looking specifically for the alignment of their goals. So if an acquiring company if they're looking to expand geographically, right? They're probably going to try to find a company that has a really good sales team. So you can't necessarily say like, I might have a great marketing team that makes a great leadership, has great leadership in our company. But if the acquiring company needs a strong sales team, maybe I'm not equipped as a seller to provide what that acquiring company is looking for. So that's something that you'll have to kind of like put in place. And a lot of times the acquiring company is looking for something they can expand on, not necessarily what they provide. Because if they have, what's in place, they're not looking for that. They're looking for something that can, have like future growth trajectory.
Add value. So interesting, something you said, and this has been a long conversation. Again, I'm going to speak specifically for CEOs inside Vistage because I found them to be very kind. They're often family-owned businesses. They've been growing business for a long time. They really deeply care about their people. That's been so far my experience. So it's not very transactional. People is a really key component to them. Some places really value and companies tenured employees, and they'll talk to me and they're like, these people have been here for 25 years. To me, like you said, that doesn't equate to success. And I actually believe sometimes people don't have that competitive advantage, the skill set that is needed. And one of the things that we're always trying to break is when, like, I'll give an example. We just went, I led a leadership offsite for a nonprofit. There are about 450 employees and they're growing and scaling, and we need to reorganize their org chart, right? And be like, okay, how are we going to scale and grow? And what I see these people do, they always go to people that they already have and trying to feed them in some roles. They're like, well, but Mary's been with us for 20 years. So where would Mary go? Where would John go? And I always say, I'm like, no, let's start with what skills and roles do we need? Right?
Yes,
Again, who do we
exactly.
need to maybe acquire? What roles do we need instead of trying to fit in these people that been with us? So I don't know, what's your take on like tenured employees? Like, yes, longevity, but I love that bringing in like a track record, right? It's like, yeah, you've been loyal and you've been with us for 20 years, but do you have the skills that are required
Yes.
to take us to the next level?
And there is that thin line, right? With juggling, are we bringing in the talent that's the right cultural fit, or do we keep, maybe not the very, very best, talent that we could recruit, but culturally, like they fit best with with the company, so they work well with the other operating factors of the company, like the other leadership, the other employees, and as a whole, they can grow together. So there is a thin line to kind of tread of, do we grow and promote internally versus recruiting new talent to reach those objectives. I'd say in my experience, I've seen both, but I always think that it works best when you have a company that tries to promote internally first. And reason being is because what you don't want to do is kind of hit your company with the news of, hey, by the way, we're selling our company, and in the process, we are going to be removing, a tenured employee to replace him with a new guy that no one knows anything about, no one has any comfortability with. And that can cause that ripple effect where the employees within the company, they're going to start feeling that uncertainty. They're going to want to know, like, should I jump ship too? Is my job on the line?
At risk.
And, and whether or not you have the right leadership team in place, they could be strong leaders, great bosses, but when uncertainty comes in, that, they can easily jump ship, and that, can depreciate the value of your business. Right. So I think to be safe, I would always recommend that, you try to find and promote the talent within your company, invest in more business development, more education, training. That just goes good as in general, as a good boss, right? As a good leader, you want to invest in your team that you're that's moving in your company. You want to make sure that they're equipped, and that looks good on your part as well. So that is a thin line. I wouldn't shy away from hiring, talent, because sometimes that's what your company needs. If you've been working at something for 20 years and you're not reaching your growth projection, you're not reaching that goal that you've had that vision for, probably your brother, your aunt that you hired, or your uncle that works with you might not be the best fit, because you're compromising for your emotions, the feelings within the business, and that, like I said, it becomes a challenge.
Yeah, no, we're always looking at this matrix of, we call it character, right? And performance. And it's like low performer, high character. It's like, yeah, they're great fit, but again, they're low performers. On the opposite spectrum of like high performers, but low character, not a good fit. again, culture killers, like can't keep them, right? So we're always looking, I think both are important. It's like we're looking at your fit, but we're also looking at your track record of performance. So if we are talking in an ideal scenario, right? I'm speaking with someone who is 5 years out from exiting. Would you
Mhm.
say this, if they realize, because that's the conversations I'm having, they know they don't have the best team in place. They know they don't have the A players because again, they built this company, they couldn't afford to hire players or whatever reason is.
Mhm.
Would you suggest like switching it as soon as possible so that you can create that longevity and that will increase evaluation rather than doing it last minute?
Absolutely. I think so. Typically, when you're in the M&A process, right, when you're going through due diligence, it's not necessarily recommended to make dramatic changes. Operationally, like as you know, with my experience in
Yeah.
operations, it's never a good idea to make drastic changes that you cannot track. Too many changes, whether it's in executive leadership, if it's in operational activities, if it's in market segmentation, like you cannot make change like that, and it goes very heavily with humans and capital as well,
Yeah.
right? To say to a potential acquirer, like, this is what we've been doing for the past few years, this is the margins we've hit, and this is the team we've had in place for 5 years, to come back and say, like, we've replaced and changed these two top personnel that we thought were key employees, they cannot say without a doubt or with at least a level of certainty that after or post acquisition, everything will remain the same.
Yeah.
So there's a
And they
lot
also
of
have no track record, right? To say,
exactly like we mentioned the first time, no track record.
yeah.
Um,
So let's talk about acquisitions. Acquisition is a big part of culture work that I see because again, I love working with people that have amazing culture. They're like, Anya, we have such a good culture. Like we love our people, we invest in our people, we have great culture. We're gonna acquire a couple of smaller companies. So how do we ensure, and again, from your perspective, is there something you would recommend for that successful integration?
to acquire small companies. Okay.
Culture,
Yes,
again, culture and talent
for sure.
perspective. It's like, how do we, merge them and enroll them into our culture?
Okay. If you are a larger company acquiring a smaller company, I think communication is very key. It needs to be rolled out very strategically because there are just a few things that large companies overlook. We had a conversation before where I told you about like coming from a fintech space and going right into corporate, and no one thought about having the conversation about what is it like when we physically move this company into another company.
Yeah,
And it sounds great, it looks great on paper, everything rolled up really nicely, but when it came to moving the physical people into the corporate building, it was clash all the way from the start to finish. We had smaller companies, a fintech, we're very casual, we dress casually,
yeah,
and going into the office and walking in there where everyone is suit and tie was an immediate like disconnection between the two companies. You immediately felt the separation, and whether or not one group of individuals were more talented, the other is irrelevant. It was the feeling of having that separate connection within the company. So I think communication is key. I think the acquirer needs to really work with the leadership team to ensure how they're going to roll that out for the rest of the employees. And that takes maybe taking your key managers, if you have key sections, your operations section, or operations people, to make sure that they get rolled up nicely. If you have your finance team or your marketing team, right? Everybody kind of needs to have their integration process rolled out. They need to have a point of contact. So where if they're feeling left out, if they're uncertain about what's happening, they can
mhm,
talk to someone that's not a part of the new company,
yeah,
right? Because can you imagine being in that boat where you're in the smaller company and you're getting integrated into a huge corporate playground,
yeah.
and you don't know who you can voice your concerns to,
I
right?
already feel threatened, right? I already feel less than. I already feel like
Mhm.
I don't know how things work here. Yeah,
And
that
so
will
what
be the last person I'll reach out to.
So I think having that in place, having the point of contacts in place, knowing, establishing the line of communication. Is this going to be an open door where you can come openly talk to your new bosses, right?
Yeah.
Is that possible, or do you have to follow the chain of command, right? Is there a chain of command? Who knows when you're near a new company, And so these
So,
are
so true. So
these are all the things that I think get overlooked because everyone is so focused on the transaction of getting the deal done that we forget to look at like what happens after and how are the employees affected once that transaction actually
yeah.
occurs. Yeah.
I really love the scheduling part, right? So there's a communication and there's time for integration. And I think from a, again, kind of like psychological safety, trust perspective, also making it okay that we're not going to hit the ground running on the first day. It's okay. We expect there to be transition time. Because I feel like so often, like people have those self-inflicted expectations, like, as of Monday, I'm integrated into the new payroll system. I'm integrated into the new, let's say, Salesforce. I'm expected to know how to do it. And that already creates, right, like you said, that separation where it's like, no, guys, we know there's gonna be a transition period. There's a schedule for finance people. This is who you're gonna meet with. This is what it's gonna look like. Here's how long it's gonna go. Here are the people you can ask questions. Those are all, again, there's like more about emotions and psychology, right? Than a
Yeah.
transaction.
You
To
hit it right on the head, Anya, actually, when you said like we do the checklist of like, oh, fill out this document, sign here, and then go meet with this person. We go through those things, but we never look at like I said, on paper, that integration goes right. We're checking the box, right? Get this employee on the new payroll system, get their benefits started, like all the checkbox, right? Get their papers signed, the NDAs, all that stuff. But what does that actually do? That is strictly for back office. That's back office integration, has nothing to do with the integration of the
culture.
people and the culture.
Integration of culture. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think the challenge is often what I see is I would ask the CEO, actually, describe me your culture. Like, what is it like to work here? And they don't know.
I had a great client who I would say he did a really good job of establishing the culture that he envisioned. And it's funny because the culture that he established was really militant, so to speak. And as you know, I have a military background. So
Yeah.
I had a really profound respect for the type of
Yeah.
company this was, right? And it was interesting because he doesn't have military background, but the people who work for him did. And you can see very easily that like when you walk in the company, right on the wall, they have a hierarchy of goals and objectives and the incentive plan. It is plastered in a big poster.
Clear, concise.
Clear, concise, right off the bat, when you walk in that room, what you're gonna hit, where you're at, where you stand, what's ahead of you, if you don't hit that mark, it's possible to go backwards.
Yeah.
It's very clear, and the incentive was also paired with putting the appropriate culture that is motivated in that way, right? The culture, majority of the people that work for him were, retired military veterans. And they obviously establish a form of camaraderie. They're really big on going after the mission, hitting the goals, checking the boxes, things like that. And so when you know and understand that aspect of your culture, and I know military is very specific, but like I said, it wasn't a military company, so
Yeah.
to look at it and say majority of my employees are familiar and they meet this type of culture. This is how they bond. This is how they get along. How can I incentivize my work culture to match the culture that they live by every day? Right? I think that's important. So, like I said, mad kudos to one of my clients because he did a great job of establishing that. He knew how they thought mentally. He just kind of had more of that psychological impact, that emotional impact in his company, and it showed because the company, yes, they're profitable, but when you look at the tenure of the employees, they have stayed, 20 plus years. They have people who bought their first home finally from working at the company because it was incentivized that way. Like, like they have that open communication where they can express and talk to each other about their plans and their goals. And I think
Yeah.
that fostering that culture, now you have people who not only want to do it like for themselves personally, but now they're involved in each other's growth. And when you get them involved in each other's growth, now they're involved in the company growth. So now you're getting people who can actually come up with the ideas. They foster that collaborative culture.
Yeah.
And when they can come up with those ideas and they see and align the same way, now you just get a team of executors,
Yeah, totally.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. What I love about it that it's very clear. And that's how I see culture. I need to be able to say, yes, oh my God, that sounds amazing, or hell no, this sounds like not my culture at all. Because we're
Mhm.
acquiring like a creative marketing agency. This is going to be hell for them.
Oh
And that's
yeah.
good to know. It's like, so that's what culture is for me. It's like it needs to be operationalized where it's very clear that this is how we do things around here, that will allow people to say, oh my God, I've been waiting for a company like this for 20 years. Finally, someone has very clear expectations, objectives, goals. I know what's expected of me. I love it. Or to say like,
Anya,
I like being
yeah.
agile. I like being creative. I cannot do this step by step. I don't believe in this. I believe the world is always changing. And it's like they would know that, you know what? I don't think it's a fit for me. Like I will not do well here.
And to your point, Anya, you mentioned that, most people, most CEOs, they can't answer the question of what culture their company has. And do you think that that's because of the issue of just like, there's a lot of social issues that people don't want to talk about out loud. There's a lot of laws that pass, so people are less um, inclined to be very straightforward about, the type of business they want to run, the type of culture they want to have, because they want to be all inclusive,
Mm,
right? And I think that all inclusivity like deteriorates from being very specific about this is who we are, this is
yeah.
what we're here to do. So like like that is a factor, right? People are
I,
afraid to be
I think
specific.
that's a great point. But just like with market, right? When we do market research, I think good products are clear that here's who we're for and who we're not for. And
Mhm.
yes, there's definitely social pressure to be inclusive and to be appealing. But I think a lot of companies, to me, in my experience, they just haven't taken the time to
Mhm.
strategically think about what is our culture. If I ask all 50 of my employees to describe a culture in 3 words, that's what I ask. Like, describe it in three
Mhm.
words. Is it a culture of we're creative, we're collaborative, and we're like kind, right? For example, I talk a lot about like we're kind,
Yeah.
which to me, I'm like, they lack accountability, they lack ownership, but we don't have a lot of fun. Great.
Mhm.
Like, that's clear to me, right? Or we're a culture of I don't think people are just strategic enough to be like, okay, and this is a good exercise. If you were to acquire another company, like how would you describe your culture? What kind of people work here? How do you make decisions? How do you run your meeting? How do you allocate your resources? How do you approach hiring? Like, how do you approach performance management, right? Those are all critical aspects of any culture. And if you
Mhm.
just sat down for half of the day with your leadership team, or you created kind of like, I'm all about like create a mission team of like culture champions and ask them, when you talk to your brother-in-law and he tells you like, hey, Evie, what kind of company do you work for? What's the vibe there? Like, what would you tell them at a barbecue?
Exactly. Mhm.
Like, that's it.
If, if you can't answer that right away, then like I can see how that's an issue, definitely. Um, I would say a lot of people who can't describe their company culture and like immediately, I mean, there could be many reasons, right? Let's say you have a really big company, right?
Yeah,
400 plus employees, for
yeah,
example. You can picture that like a high school, right?
yeah.
You got so many different interwoven groups within that company. And depending on who you ask in that company, what their culture is like, they might have a different answer, a different experience. And that could be, to unfortunately, that could be the CEO or the seller's
Yeah.
fault because
Yeah.
they didn't clearly define that to begin with. So everyone kind of found their own room to stand. They developed their own culture. And usually it's the people with the stronger mindsets, the more influential people who are developing that culture within your company. So it's
Yeah.
definitely something to watch for, right? So like if you're in the position of not knowing what your company culture is like, just know that without that control, there's people within your company that's going to define it for you.
They are creating the culture. Everybody has a culture.
Yes,
Every
everyone has a
company
culture.
has a culture.
Yeah,
It's a
it's either you're
question of
aware of it
did
or
you
not.
design it or did it create itself by default? But what you're saying, I actually think with larger companies, the way I look at it, we need to have an umbrella of values and how the vision, but I actually think it's healthy for each department and each team to have it's almost like subculture. Because again, the way
Mhm.
we do things at sales is going to be different from the way we do things in finance. And that's okay.
Exactly.
As long as we all understand, like, here's what's okay and here's what's not okay, we're aligned on behavioral expectations, we're aligned on how we want to treat each other and our clients. I actually think it's healthy because, yeah, like we can't all be the same because our priorities are different and like our
Mhm.
activities are different. So just to summarize, because I feel like we're out of time and I'm like, we can do another 30 minutes.
I
Time flew by.
know. Sorry.
But to summarize, you would say that yes, for the evaluation, if you're 5 years out, like look at your people now, define if you have those A players, like what are the roles, and if culture is important to you and you want to continue to promote from within, then yeah, invest in their development, business education. It's like, and again, don't be afraid to let people go. That's what I'm going to say. Please don't be afraid to let people go. This is not the worst thing that can happen to them. Sometimes it's the best thing because actually you're not unlocking their full potential because they're stuck in a role that they've been doing for 15 years and they can be much happier. So I'm like, let's not make tenured employees your God.
Yeah. It's all
Like,
about adaptability and resilience, right?
right?
The
It's
people who
like,
can adapt and keep moving forward. If they have tenure, great.
yeah,
But it's all about who can, see, roll with the punches, see what's coming, look at
yeah,
those, navigate the challenges,
yeah.
pivot strategies, finding new opportunities. It's always about the people who can identify it and keep moving with those changes because it is constantly changing, especially with acquisitions when you don't know what the acquiring target or the acquirer wants. You have to be very flexible at that point.
Yeah, yeah. But I really appreciate, thank you for giving me your time. I love that you have a background in operations. I think it's so important to understand the intricacies of those interpersonal relationships, right? And
Mhm.
someone who's done operations understands that because operations, like you work with everybody. You're not just
Exactly.
like a department of one. So thank you so much. And yeah, Evee Walker, you can find her on LinkedIn. She's with Shoreline Partners. Reach out to her, reach out to me. And yeah, thank you for being so human. I want to debunk the myth of investment bankers that it's all
Mhm.
about transaction. It's all about successful transaction. And culture and talent integration is part of successful transaction, right? So
Yes.
thanks for showing your humanity and your understanding of relationships and the value of it. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Anya.
Thank
Appreciate
you.